Recording in progress.
Oof. Okay, I think that. Okay, is this better?
Much.
Wait a second. There's still an echo. Maybe if I connect my headphones.
All right, we'll give people just another minute to show up, but since this is an abbreviated meeting, we get started pretty shortly. This is going to be the second part of our tessellation series, and to participate, you're going to need to have a pre-creased grid with you. So make sure that you've got that, and in case you have to finish up a few creases on there, feel free to do that. Catherine, I'm making you co-host, which means you should be able to share screen and all that,
Okay.
or just whatever you need to do. So
Let's see if I can angle my light here. All right, so I've can everybody see my screen? Can you pin my, yeah, thank you, Travis. Can everybody hear me? Or can somebody hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. All right, so it looks like William is still connecting. How many people were we expecting? So it looks like we have
The intro to Tessellations. It's going to be a 3-part. Last time we had, it was like 8 people, but I know 2 of them said they were going to have to watch the recorded one of this because of a time zone or something.
Oh, I see.
So we're pretty close, I think.
Hi, William.
Hello.
Okay. These are pretty small. So I was planning on showing some examples of some variations before I start with the crease pattern here, to just kind of highlight what all you can do using this video as a guideline. So it's hard to see, but this is the, actually, I wonder if I can do it backlit. So here is the goal of this class. This is the crease pattern I will be teaching. So you'll notice there are thin hexagons surrounding this sort of floral pattern. Now, what you can do here, once we know the crease pattern, is you can put spacing between these flowers, like in this one. So you can see there's a thicker padding. I'll show you how to do that if you feel like it. This one's a little more complicated, but you can add a double beam around the flowers if you feel like it. And this one is one I recently did. It has alternating widths. So one of them is double padding, one of them is single padding around the flowers, alternating. So they look a little bit irregular. They look more triangular than hexagonal. So that's just a few examples of the variations you can do with this pattern. And I'm sure many of you could think of any number of unique ideas to go off of this baseline. But the basic crease pattern we're going to be doing today is just this one here. So I've already folded this and I've highlighted all the things we need to pre-crease. So all of the red triangles are what we're going to be pre-creasing. So just to give you an example of how it'll look like in the end and why we want to pre-crease this. So you'll notice here in the grid lines, my camera will focus. These, this center, I have the grid line outlined. And these red triangles do not lie along the grid lines. They bisect triangles that form the grid. So in order to get the shape that we want, we need to create these lines so that when we go to squash it, it's nice and clean. And at the end, eventually when we go to collapse the model, what's going to happen is you'll want to have each of the points of the triangle, trying to get this in good lighting here. So this point of the triangle extending all the way, extending and extending, you kind of end up with this piece here. If anyone can see it. And it's sort of going to end up being a squash and a twist at the same time. So you'll twist it. I'll move these in a counterclockwise direction. So taking this beam, folding it over one grid line. So this one and this one. And then the third one there. So this is the basic twist shape. So this will not lie flat until you flip it over and you squash it down. So since I already folded this one, it was pretty fast. But that's kind of why we're doing this pre-creasing, is so that we have it really easy for us, especially when we have all these other folds going around in that environment. We can get a really clean element there, so we can form this pattern that that our goal is. So that is just a basic introduction of why we're doing this. This is a grid that's a little bit bigger, so it's easier to see the pattern. And so basically, let me pull up my example guy. So it's kind of hard to see on this one, but yeah, that's a little bit better. So we want to have like a six-sided twist in the center here. And then these triangles go folding into it. So basically, in order to do a hexagon twist, and we're not folding quite yet, but we want to find the center. So using your shape of the hexagon shouldn't be too hard. This part's the center. So then you want to fold things into that. And again, we'll go over this in more detail during the collapse lesson. You basically want to fold the points into each other in a twisting pattern. And this is basically just to help us find out where our first triangle is going to start. It's not necessary to fold it all the way when you're doing the crease pattern if you already know it. But just if I'm designing for myself, in order to find out where I want to place things, I kind of half fold it anyway. So in order to do this crease pattern, we're going to go up one length, so one grid line, one unit triangle. And then starting out from here, after you give it a little bit of space, you're going to fold the triangle here. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a crease to mark that spot. And then I'm going to unfold it so we can count the actual grid lines. So this being the center on your grid, you want to go out 1, 2, 3 units right here and start your triangle folds. So basically what you want to do is you want to make a crease, a mountain fold that goes through these 2 points and these 2 points and these 2 points. So you're basically going to want to fold this into a triangle. There. So pretty simple. You guys have been coming to these, you just pinch it up. It's a little uncomfortable at first because you're folding in the center of the page, but just use your fingernails Again, be sure to make precise creases. And there you go. You got one triangle here. Now, that's essentially what we're going to be doing the entire time. The entire point of a tessellation is you could basically do it to infinity across an infinite plane. So this is going to be the whole class for however big your paper is. But once you learn the pattern, you can do this, make it however big you want. So this is kind of just to demonstrate the basic unit that we'll be working with. So it's kind of like a cluster of these triangles. So then from here, so you remember we folded it in a spiral. Basically, we're going to repeat this triangle on all 6 sides of this center hexagon. Before I move on, does anybody have questions? All right, silence is golden. Let me check the chat real quick. Nothing in the chat. Okay, then you could basically just rotate it a little bit, do the same exact thing. Count 1, 2, 3 from the center. Mark that. Another way to, another reference point is you could count 3 units away from this other triangle here. 2, 3. So, okay, this line is going to start here and it's going to be, you know, center to center of this edge here. So that's another way you can get your lines. And it's always really good to check multiple points, especially if you're doing a really complicated design, so that you prevent mistakes. So that's one of the cons to pre-creasing tessellations is you could make a huge mistake, make a small mistake, and it cascades down to the entire rest of the paper. So you really want to be sure that you're checking to make sure that everything's lining up. If you're just folding them in the moment, it's a little harder to make crisp, clean, pre-folded creases. But you are kind of guaranteed, you almost can't continue mistakes for too long because it becomes unfoldable or it's immediately visible. So that's something to keep in mind if you wanted to explore tessellations more. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop talking so I can fold my triangle here. And I think you guys have enough information to finish this circle of triangles. So you should have 6 around that center hexagon. Okay, so I folded all my triangles. I'm just going to go ahead and mark the creases so that they're really clear. I don't normally draw lines when I'm folding bigger designs, but just so we have a clear idea of where these are marked, it makes the next part a little bit easier. Okay, so I'm gonna go grab another color marker real quick. Oh, I put them all right here. That's great. So basically, this circle of hexagons here is kind of going to be like a cluster. So if we wanted to just fold this now, it would still look pretty. But I'm interested in making this cluster tessellate. So I want to create like a kind of a honeycomb pattern. Oh, I really wish this showed up better. Let's see. Block the light. That's good enough. So you see this, that first cluster of center cluster here, not a cluster. Okay. Yeah, it's a cluster of triangles. That is basically what we've just folded the pre-creases for. But you'll notice that there are, there's that pretty outline that makes kind of a cell around the flower. And then there are a bunch of other flowers there. So what we're going to do next is just create that beam there. And I think my audio is echoing again.
It's not bad.
Okay, well,
I didn't
before
notice it.
John.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is kind of where that variation choice comes in, is where when we're trying to connect this cluster of I'll just call it a flower cluster to the next one, its neighbor. So the design we're going to be doing is only going to be 1 unit away from that last triangle. So this is the circle. You want to go 1 unit out, and that's going to be another triangle. And this is going to be the beginning. Essentially, if you were just to pick up this cluster and then drop it down here, this triangle is the same as this triangle. It's oriented the same way, and you're basically going to make it this the we'll just say the leftmost. What would that be? That's 9 o'clock, right? That's going to be your 9 o'clock triangle for this cluster too. So I don't have a big enough sheet of paper to make a full cluster, but essentially that's what you're going to do on your grid, is complete it as if it is a full cluster, even though I cannot demonstrate that with this piece of paper. So for example, let me see if I can swap this in. We have similarly, let me get this, just draw it. So we've got this cluster here, and if I were to explain it the same way, this triangle over here is basically the same as this triangle over here. It's just, this is the repeat pattern. So if you just like picked it up and plopped it down, you're going to fold the same clusters. So some of you might have the creases down based on that explanation, but we'll go over how to fold the rest of them. And it's basically the same. You find the center, and unfortunately for me, the center is the exact corner of my hexagon. But you can still use that as reference points to do 1, 2, 3. Okay, this is another triangle. It's an incomplete triangle, but you still want to do the pre-creases for it, and all the way down the line. So, or you can use the center of this edge here, 1, 2, 3 units, and then make another triangle here. So this is still like a flower unit. You can't see all of it because I needed this to be big enough for you to see on the video. So to go into an explanation of where you can add variations while you guys are folding the rest of the that circle, or I guess it's a hexagon technically. If you wanted to add more padding between the 2 clusters, what you would do is instead of going 1 unit over, you could do 2. yeah, theoretically you could put as much space between them as you wanted, and this would still work as a functioning tessellation. So in this one, I did 2 units. The grid is just very small, but that's 2 units of padding, and that kind of gives you the proportions if you wanted to experiment with that. And this one is a little bit different, but I'll go ahead and show it off too. So instead of doing one beam and putting a triangle, I actually put sort of a more complicated squash twist in the middle of this here. So instead of just going straight to a triangle, it had a different element in between them. That one's a little more complicated. We won't go over it, but just to give you some inspiration, there's so many possibilities you could really do to play around with these concepts. Okay, so that's one cluster over there. Basically, you just go around this circle and add, you count over 1 unit, make your triangle, complete the circle. And you'll notice over here, when you complete the triangles in this cluster here, that goes right here, based on the 1 unit away from this cluster, it incidentally ends up being 1 unit away from this cluster. That's a good way to check yourself to make sure you've got the pre-crease correct. You should be able to have the same spacing away from every single group. Okay, and I'm gonna actually, I noticed that I didn't actually fold any of these, I just wrote them down. So I'm gonna go ahead and crease these. And does anybody have any questions on the pre-creasing part so far?
Yeah, so creasing the actual triangles is weird and strange for me just because I'm like almost doing this without reference. Am I supposed to be lining things up that I'm not seeing? It's like I can almost like get a little bend at the edge of like one of the triangle grids and like say, okay, I've got 2 points. I can go from those 2 points, but it's still kind of scary.
Could you share your video so I can see what you're talking about?
Sure. This is going to be interesting. So yeah, like, and this is an incredibly small grid because I'll save the other one for when I've got and not paying attention to video at the same time. But so like right here, like as I'm folding the crease for this triangle, like I can kind of say, and I'll just use a blank one. So as I try to kind of fold it, you can kind of see that it's like, all right, it's diamonding up. All right, we can kind of flatten that out. And eventually I wind up with this spot where it's like, okay, that's a line there between this point and this point. And I can just kind of like fold so that the line hits the ends of both those points. But I also feel weird about not having like a reference other than just those 2 points. And maybe that's just the way it goes, but.
Well, yeah, it's, I lack the ability to, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just so normal to me. But yeah, with these bigger grids especially, it is a lot of distance between 2 points and you do have to pinch it. So, you know, just use the grid to your advantage. Make sure this is like, if it helps, you can have this kind of folded up on both sides so that you have the grid to like lock you in, and then it kind of pinches itself almost. But
oh, okay, I kind of see what you're saying there.
Yeah, so like create like a stopper for you, and that way we'll get better lighting. That's a little better. Yeah, you kind of just you want to pinch it at those diamonds so it doesn't go past and that it stays down the center. But ultimately, it's not such a big deal if it's not the perfect on a grid this big. So if you're folding on a smaller grid, it's probably going to seem a little easier just because you have less kind of loosey-goosey space. And it's just the reference points are a lot closer together simply because the grid is smaller.
Well, and like you said, like kind of like hitting the actual grid points like outside of the triangle, and everything's super shadowed right now, but like pinching this off to say, all right, like there, like I've got a line, then to be like, okay, here's something. It's not really a reference, but it does kind of like help to say, all right, it's helped guiding the fold of the triangle. So I think that kind of like
You
gives
shall
me a
not
little more
pass
confidence.
kind of thing. Yes. So, and another thing that could help is when you're actually collapsing the model, I really like to have a toothpick on hand. I actually have a stash all over my apartment for whatever surface I happen to be folding on. So like I demonstrated it on the smaller grid here when I collapsed it, but basically these triangles end up, you're gonna be like putting them on a table and then like popping them down. If you're struggling with this, because the grid lines aren't super great, you can take a toothpick and kind of just like shape it underneath the folds. So if it's kind of like janky, you can kind of just like tuck it in, so to speak, like make them really sharp. And then if it's still like, oh no, you just flip it over and you kind of like, it helps because you can't get your fingers under here, you know, to like really make sure that those edges are very crisp. And so the toothpick is perfect because it's not going to puncture your paper. It's going to just assist, and then it ends up looking really clean. Like this is what you're looking for. On the bigger grids, it's not so important, but if you are folding something smaller, okay, this stuff is like, you need a toothpick if you're folding this small. You just simply do. I'm not even going to tell you I do it without a toothpick. You need tools. You need the right tools. But for the bigger grids, if you're finding that you don't feel like you're have a good grasp of like hitting all the points, then there are still things you can do with like using your grid lines to assist that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
Let's unpin. There we go. Okay. Are there any more questions about pattern? Does everybody understand how to like replicate it infinitely? That's basically all I had to go over. You have all the tools you need now.
Brilliant.
So I guess I'll ask, since I have this, very, very small grid, like, and I've got my 6 triangles, and it's about all I'm going to be able to fit into the size grid that I have in front of me. What's like the next step in collapsing these 6 triangles?
Okay, so if you want to know about collapsing it, and this is going to go really fast. Actually, let me just finish the pre-creasing on this one so I can show you how it goes. But it's essentially you want to start out with a hexagon in the center. That's kind of like a pinwheel. And this is skipping a bit ahead in the lesson plan. I didn't prepare to explain collapse, so I'll just have to do my best. but you know what, that's enough just to demonstrate. It's like, yeah, it's 1.5. So essentially, you're gonna find that center line again here. And then I'll just take this really, really slow, but effectively you want to go out 2 units. So this one here. So the hexagon you want to kind of collapse is, let's get a different color. This one's nice. This is kind of the hexagon you want to collapse. So what you want to do is, this is 1, 2 beams out from the center, kind of like gather it up, mountain folds, and then this one here. So 1 unit or 1 grid line from the center grid line, valley fold. Now it's in on itself. So you basically want to do that with every single beam, but you'll notice that you've already folded this one. So what do? You kind of unfold it a little bit to where the grid line, instead of extending through this. So if you were to fold them individually, it would be, you know, this or this. But in order to do them together, they intersect at this point here. So you kind of just make a triangle out of the grid lines. Not, well, they 3 grid lines intersect at this point. So you want to have this one going valley folds at 1 away from the center. This one going valley fold from 1 way at the center. And you kind of get this little, like, I don't know. This is some sort of shape that I'll think of a better word for when we actually do the class. And
with flap on the left, I guess that doesn't really matter, but like if we're going to, like, you know, so I don't wind up with a weird hexagon, flap should be pointing to the left.
Yeah, it could, you could technically have it point to the right. It just depends. Do you want it to swirl clockwise or counterclockwise? So that's the way this is going to point. So this is pointing, it's going to be a circle around this hexagon. So this would be, what is this? Counterclockwise. And then this would be clockwise. I don't pay too much attention to which way they swirl, but I do like to keep it consistent throughout the whole tessellation. You don't have to. There are no rules about that. So essentially, if you wanted to continue to collapse it, you would do the same thing for this side. So, okay, well, I want to make sure that this 1, 2 units away from the center, this grid line is folded in. Oh no, it's stopped by this already folded grid line. And then you kind of just make a leg. Boom. And so now you've got, like, I don't know. I like to think of it as like a stick figure, except there's no head. So it's just like 2 arms. I call these legs in my head by myself. I don't know what the actual term is for them. Maybe we should make one up. So then you just keep folding along until doing the same thing until you get to like this part here. And now you're realizing that in order to fold this straight along, you're going to intersect this already folded one too. You can just ignore that and pretend it's just a flat piece of paper. Honestly, like a big part of folding tessellation is pretending it's not already folded and just folding over it. That's how you keep your paper organized while you're trying to resolve all the intersecting grid lines. So is that making sense so far?
Yeah, and honestly, I'm just kind of like fumbling around with the paper right now to try to actually get that second leg going. But I feel like that it's going to be something that I'm going to like get. But right here, right now, I'm not necessarily going to try to force it per se.
And you can always go back to the video where I had it folded to 2 legs because we are recording.
Yeah,
this.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then
And-
what ends up happening with the triangles? If
Okay,
like
so after you finish the hexagon and the ending bit of this, like spoiler alert, is you kind of just punch it out, unfold it, and then pop it down so it's all facing the same way. There are other ways to fold this. So if you wanted to just like, if you knew what shape you wanted and you folded it before, you could honestly just kind of like pinch the beams with your fingers so that you have 6 center lines, or I guess they're 3 center lines that form like 6 legs going through the center. And instead of going all the way to the center, you kind of cut it off 2 units away. So it makes kind of a little skirt. And then you just sort of push all those legs counterclockwise or clockwise, whichever direction. So you can form the twist that way too. It's just a lot easier to do that way if you know what the shape is going to look like in the end. So it's 2 different explanations for it. The triangles, these are fun. I love this shape. So you kind of want to push it out to be like a table. So the triangle is on top. You have this beam, which is connected to this hexagon twist, or a variation of it. I call them pinwheeled. And then this beam. So basically, if you pretend that this is just extending straight out, it's the same fold I showed earlier. And you kind of just like pop it down. So instead of continuing the mountain folds on these grid lines, you make these 3 center ones valley folds. And then it just, would that be a sink fold, Travis?
That whole maneuver.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well-
so right. Open it up a little bit, because right now you've got it. Ugh. I mean, you get to a point where it's kind of like making the distinction doesn't make sense. You could call that like a sink and unsink, that then you did like that you kind of spread squashed or something. But it's kind of a sink, yeah. Like if it's flat like that, then you could call it a sink.
Okay. Well, then we're gonna go back and squash it. So basically, in order to, like I said, it was a twist and a squash at the same time. I guess squashes are naturally twists. Well, some of them are. Anyway, so you want to take this triangle, and it really doesn't matter which way the legs are oriented. So you kind of just push the legs down so that it lies flat here. But you'll notice there's like something poking out on the back. And it's this guy. So you really just push it flat, it's a triangle. And there it's flat. And then over here, it's also flat. So it works out pretty cool. So this was your triangle. That's what they end up looking like. So since we're sneak peeking the collapse episode, I'll kind of show you, if you're going through the process of folding all these, then this is kind of what the flower looks like. It's hard to see it because I've made markings for the crease patterns instead of what the collapse is going to look like. So it kind of gets lost in the grid lines, but trust me, this is the pattern I showed and the picture in the email. So when you do that to all the triangles, it's kind of easy to see on the back. You get this this sort of ring of triangles. And looks like a mess up here because I did the grid lines. And they kind of just intersect over each other. And so in order to kind of clean it up, you just sort of make this shape here. You unfold it just a little bit and you make like a, I don't know what to call this. I want to say like a trapezoid shape, like half of a hexagon pokes out. And just nice and easy. Oh, that's my rice maker. Don't worry about that. So when you finish doing that ring of shapes, and we'll go over this in much greater detail on the collapse video. It ends up kind of interesting on the back. So it kind of looks like there are a bunch of kind of rounded triangles poking into this circle of hexagon, or this hexagon shape. But on the front though, it looks super snazzy because now you've got these like rectangles poking in around this flower. So that's kind of shows you what it would look like if you wanted to put spacing in here. So like if you can visualize this, the next flower, what if it was all the way out here and you had all this negative space in here? That would be cool. Or if you put it in really close and it was like very densely packed. So you can choose to do the crease pattern. The placement of the triangles is really, there are so many choices to make whenever you're folding a tessellation. So it's a lot of personal style. It's a lot of, like problem solving. So if you wanted to make something really different, you could maybe say, well, maybe we won't put a triangle here. What if we just put like, I don't know, a basic triangle squash? What would that look like? So you can do all sorts of fun things with it. But yeah,
also, I really appreciate you going over a little bit of the collapse, because Lord knows that I'm gonna hopefully have another grid folded for like the next session, and this is something I'm gonna want to have a little more muscle memory prior to then. The small bits and pieces are a little bit easier for me to ingest than the entire crease pattern followed by like the entire collapse.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And it's really interesting too, because these triangle pieces, they're one of my favorite elements to fold with. So if I unfold this a little bit, because you can really, let me just isolate one. Let me try to make this as visible as possible. When you fold with these, you are bisecting an equilateral triangle, right? The grid. So that's 30 degrees, but the grid line, the actual equilateral triangles are like 60 degrees. So what you can do is make those rectangle shapes, which is what we were doing earlier. So if you've got this triangle here that's collapsed, then you can just kind of you can highlight this grid line that's coming off of it, and you can kind of tuck it under, however, this way, that way, the other way. But it makes a nice 90-degree right angle, which I find to be really cool on the hex grid, because that's not something you can, well, I guess that's how you do it to get those right angles. I think it looks really cool. But another thing with these triangle things, this is kind of like a table position where you get that flat line, but you can also have them going like in a spiral shape. So that can be really cool too. And you can, this is a little more complicated, but you can kind of like tuck them in so that they're covered. And if you do that on all sides, that can be a really new way to fold an old pattern. It's another kind of like sunken into the landscape, so to speak. So this isn't at all relevant to what I was intending to teach. This is kind of just me having fun with what you could do. So now this is the same triangle, but part of it is hidden by other grid lines. Pretty neat. So you can do a lot with it. There's so many things. And it's still got that little triangle on the back there.
Awesome. Any other questions from y'all? Cool. Thank you, Catherine. That was awesome. I'm right here.
Oh, cool.
It's kind of fun. It's interesting because if I was like looking at this, the way I would have gone about like pre-creasing and collapsing this would have been completely different. But your way is a lot more fun. So that's pretty cool.
Were you thinking about like trying to do it all at once?
Yeah, I would have done it the way I would do any model, just pre-crease everything, because like there's off-grid elements in here that you didn't have to pre-crease because of the way you collapse it. That's cool. So yeah, pretty neat. I think the next meeting is October, it's either the 12th or 13th. It's either the 12th or 13th. I emailed y'all, but I think it's the 13th. So we'll meet again then for the official collapse bit.
Wait,
But,
I thought you said you were busy that Wednesday.
Oh, maybe I did.
You either gave me bad information or you're not.
No, it's Tuesday the 12th.
Okay.
Tuesday. Okay. Yep. This is why. Oh, today's Wednesday. That's
Yes.
right. I'm a little bit out of it, y'all.
Hang in there,
12th.
Travis.
Yes. Yeah, we're hanging. Okay. Cool. Well, thank you so much. I'm running another meeting in 13 minutes, so I'm gonna head out. But yeah, thank you all so much. This is great, and we'll upload the recording for this as soon as we can.
All right. Thanks, everyone. This has been a ton of fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome. All right, we'll see you all around.
Bye.